This is going to be an interesting episode. I've been looking forward to this one since I met Alex Petkas. He specializes in the intellectual history of post-classical Greek philosophy, especially in the late Roman and early Christian world. He has published articles on classical Athenian oratory and various topics in late antique Greek intellectual culture. Wow, sounds interesting already. He is also co-editor of a book of essays and sources on the late antiquity philosopher Hypatia of Alexandria, and is working on a monograph on her student Synthesis of Cythenia. He holds a PhD from Princeton University. So that means he used to live in New Jersey. He aims to make these ancient stories accessible, dramatic, and relevant to modern listeners, focusing on the lessons in history, strategy, and personal growth embedded in the lives of historic statesmen, generals, and thinkers. He is the founder and host of The Cost of Glory, a podcast dedicated to retelling the most influential biographies from Greek, Roman antiquity, especially Plutarch's parallel lives. Alex, welcome.
Great to be here, Darshan. Great to see you.
Let's just start. What are the aha moments that led you down this path, history, and then making the connection that you are doing? This is deeper level stuff.
Well, the current path that I'm on, as I mentioned earlier, kind of leaving academia behind a couple of years ago, was sort of catalyzed by a moment I had when I was thinking about, I just gotten this, job as a professor, and it was the coveted thing that, probably people can relate to this, that, you strive for something for a long time, and you think that that's what you want because maybe other people told you that you want it. In my case, it was, a full-time tenure-track professorship. And that's kind of like your ticket to staying in a paid capacity as an academic and not, having to subside on breadcrumbs. So I was thinking, once I got this job, do I really want this? I kind of felt all of a sudden trapped as a professor. I loved teaching and I love the students, but I'd always been a kind of bad student in high school. I was always flaking off and resisting authority and this kind of nonsense. And so I was thinking about going into the private sector, working for the family business that my dad had started a while back, a small chemical company, kind of struggling, but I wanted some different experience and like a route to a different path in life. And so as I'm doing this, I was reading one of the famous biography collections that you mentioned earlier, Plutarch's Parallel Lives, which is 48 biographies of these amazing Greek and Roman leaders, Julius Caesar, Alexander the Great. And I was just plowing through it because I felt as a student of the ancient world and ancient history, I'd never read this famous biography collection all the way through. And I felt like I need to, put some filler in the gaps in my knowledge. And I'm reading this one Roman figure that I barely knew the name of. His name was Sertorius. And the story in a nutshell is he becomes the greatest Roman rebel during the time of the civil wars. He's in the generation before Julius Caesar. A lot of tumult in Rome at the time. And Sertorius is in this situation where he's getting chased by a rival army. He's on the populist side, the kind of the People's Party, and the other army that's chasing him is the conservatives, the aristocrats. They're trying to crush all their enemies. And he's making his way to Spain and has to cross the Pyrenees, this mountain range that separates Spain and France. And he's got a tiny army, just desperate chances of survival. And as he's there in the Pyrenees, this mountain tribe of wild men in the mountains, they block the pass. And they won't let the Roman army through unless they get paid a tribute, some kind of bribe to let them through. And it's just this podunk little village of spear chuckers, and they are holding Sertorius's army hostage, and his officers are like, "Come on, man, we can take them. These guys are punks. Just this is shameful. Let's get through and crush them." And okay, it'll take a little time. Sertorius says, hey, we're going to pay them off. Because even if it cost us an extra day, it would be worth it, because we're running away from a huge army. And he says, to a man bent on great deeds, nothing is more valuable than time. And so he pays off these mountain punks just to get his army through. And he ends up holding out in Spain in this incredible 10-year-long resistance to the aristocratic party in Rome. They form a rival senate, and it's like he came really close to reconquering Rome in the name of the populist party. Amazing story. And reading that story as I'm kind of thinking about where to go in my life, something clicked for me, because here's this guy, and I was sort of getting tired of the academic establishment too. It's very bureaucratic and, very kind of, lots of gatekeepers. And I didn't like the way that we were teaching classics for a lot of reasons we can get through. But so I had this big establishment that I was sort of like, I kind of want to take these people on somehow. and Sertorius in the Pyrenees.
Alex, you're a renegade, man.
He's talking to me. He's talking to me. Yeah. I can't claim anything great like it, but to a man bent on great deeds, or at least something, nothing is more valuable than time. And I thought, well, I think it's time to stop waffling and quit this job and go do something crazy and take a risk. So that was a really inspiring story to me. And then when I started my podcast, he was the first figure that I did a biography on Sertorius, because he made a big impact on me as an amazing figure.
Well, there's a lot you said there. I'm going to unpack some of it, and it's really cool. First, I want people to understand what you gave up. A tenure-track is a guaranteed job for life. There's no retirement age, nothing. It's just when you decide to go, you go. That you gave up. And you and I have not talked about this, but I know why you gave it up. You told us, but I know the real reason. You had an inner drive, a gut-wrenching thing saying, this is not right. Even though it's great, it's perfect, you're set for life, this is not what your calling is. And what's driving your calling is the same as driving mine. The most precious resource in the world is time. And you and I both know our daily battle is not with humans, not with politics. It's time, man. Right? I mean, Father Time is amazing. Father Time gives you time. He doesn't tell you what to do with it. That's up to you.
The time is the same thing as life. It's almost like a synonym. You're wasting your time, you're wasting your life. This is the only thing that you can't get back is your kind of span of time on the planet, your life. So it really spoke to me. And I think that's right. We don't have time to waste. We have time to relax. Relaxation is important, but wasting time is very different.
Sometimes it's okay to waste a little bit of time. We're human. We can't be super efficient all the time. But in general, you need to move forward, right? And you don't have to. It's not like there's no mandate. It's the difference between, do you choose to survive or thrive? Either one wrong? No. It's a personal choice.
Yeah. And I think that a lot of people find themselves in these positions where, it's like golden handcuffs, and you don't want to walk away from this great job, but you really feel called to something else. And I'm not saying it's as soon as you realize that you have to bail, because I was still in my job for several more months. I mean, I served out, the semester, and then I told my colleagues, and I thought they were going to be really mad at me, and they probably were a little bit. They thought, A, I was nuts, but B, if you have a better option, get the heck out of here. They had kind of thought maybe there was something else that they could have done with their life, but they couldn't trade it for the security. So,
and now you're verified. You are nuts.
You're right. Yeah. Just a weirdo on the internet.
That's like fuel for growth for you.
Yeah. Well, it gives you something to prove too, which I think is really important.
You don't want to prove anything to them. You respect and you like
them.
I mean, you prove it to yourself, man.
Exactly. No, that's exactly right.
And so then you're driven by this inner drive, and you're connecting at a whole different level about history and everything. But I think you come upon something interesting, and I'm going to ask you, why is that history repeats itself? I mean, why is it that humans ultimately can't learn other than by experience.
Yeah, who is it that said the only abiding lesson of history is that men do not learn from the lessons of history? So, uh, yeah, human nature is just the same, and human social dynamics don't really change over time. But I think you can take a lot of inspiration from history and still be surprised to make the same mistakes. Because wisdom is really hard won, and there's no getting around that. But you can give yourself a leg up if you are willing to be humble and learn from people who've gone there before you, and to recognize in people that you might not think are doing what you're doing, that actually there's a lot of parallels in the kind of force of character that it takes. How do you approach risk, virtues like courage and moderation, restraint, wisdom, cleverness. All these things you can learn from people, even if they're maybe I'm not going to be leading a Roman army across mountains anytime soon, or maybe I'm not going to be founding Standard Oil, but I can learn a lot from John D. Rockefeller. I mean, like what a force of character. So yeah, I think it's still worth studying the past, even though most of the time, especially at the political level, people just kind of fall into the same patterns. It's almost like something abstract is driving things forward that's bigger than we can all understand.
In fact, if you just repeated the things you'd said earlier and replaced some of the key names to give it a time reference and a location reference, I was almost going to interrupt you and say, Alex, are you talking about history or are you talking about the current times? Right? It's the same, in a different color.
Yeah, well, at Rome there was polarization. There were factions. There was the rich versus the poor. There was the reformers versus the conservatives. And the truth gets spun in very different ways. Two people living in the same city have a completely different conception of what's going on because of these like competing narratives about who are the good guys and who are the bad guys.
The interesting thing is, even at different narratives, I've learned this from market research, they both want the same thing.
Mm.
So it's like, how does that happen, right? They both want a nice life for themselves and their family and not to worry about things too much. I mean, everybody wants a nice, simple life, right?
Yeah.
So where does that go? But I think you brought up something interesting, and that's human nature and history and stuff. And I think you and I would agree that people learn by experience. Why is that, right? You tell your child, do not touch the stove, do not touch the stove. They will touch it. Why? One, it's curiosity. And two, it's probably ego.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yeah. My 3-year-old has quite an ego, let me tell you.
Tell me what you mean.
Well, she just turned 3, and it's like you try to tell her that, I mean, stuff like potty training. She just wants to do it on her own. And if you try to reason with a kid, I think especially at that age, kids, there is something about autonomy. People really want to feel autonomous. I think that's part of why it's hard for us to learn from experience that we really want to feel in control and not feel like we're obeying other people. And
we inherently want freedom.
Mm-hmm.
Right? But Alex, I mean, you got to know, if you're a rebel, your kid's going to be a rebel.
Yeah, no, it's true.
So, half the blame goes to you.
Yeah, it's definitely genetic. We see it. We see it in our kids. They start young. But,
I've learned you need the ego at the point of survival. And even though your daughter doesn't have to worry about it, she's taken care of, there's this inner thing about survival, right? Protection mechanism. And that's where I think the ego comes in. It's healthy. But I think the problem happens is, when does the ego step back and restores balance so that the conscious and subconscious are the ones really driving your path as opposed to the ego? Does that make sense? I know it makes sense to you.
Totally. Well, I have a friend who is into kind of yogic meditation, and he makes this distinction between the ego as your kind of conscious, rational mind that that wants things and sets goals and can kind of talk you into doing things. And then there is the, what does he call it? The self, or the kind of subconscious, the like your true consciousness is something actually deeper, and it's more intuitive, and it can kind of get drowned out. It's quiet often, and you have to learn to listen to it, because your ego will tell you to get angry, but your consciousness is the thing that allows you to step back and say, this is just one voice, and I can actually think more rationally if I can calm that ego down. And this sounds very Eastern, but it's also very much in the Western tradition of like Plato and Aristotle, like the Greek philosophers and the Stoics. They talk about the different kind of parts of the soul, and they're talking about the soul is the word for psyche, or it's your mind. The Greek word is psyche. So they say the soul. We're not necessarily talking about something kind of woo-woo and metaphysical, but
it's reality.
Yeah, it's reality, and maybe we'll have a better way of measuring these with a neurological instrumentation at some point. But there's something in you that gets angry, and there's something in you that can judge whether it's a good time to get angry or not. Step back.
It's interesting what you're saying, and let me kind of rephrase what your friend said, what you said, and the way I kind of present it. Imagine, so first of all, your mind is made up of the subconscious and conscious. And as you know, and the studies have shown, 95% of your decisions come from the subconscious. But your conscious can be very strong. But then also tied to your conscious is your gut, right? That's separate. Is your heart. These are kind of same but different kind of things, right? Concepts. And I would say ego should be like the guard at Buckingham Palace, always on guard, standing there stoic. But when there's no threat, the subconscious and conscious are doing their thing. But when there's a threat, the guard steps up, points his rifle, and says, back off, right? I'm going to protect the body, the mind, the conscious, the gut, everything, because that's my role. But unfortunately, what happens is that role says, hey, I like this. And now I need more guards, and I'm going to become Mad Max. And that's the transition from ego to hubris. And in life, in society, and in people, when you get to hubris, that is the beginning of the end.
Yeah. Well, it's a tragic cycle, and this is so much of ancient literature. The Greek tragedies that talk about Oedipus and Achilles and Ajax, and these great figures that often Hercules. They often end up rising to great heights and then falling terrifically in a way that you can kind of relate to, because what hits you when you rise that high is, in the Greek mind, you start to forget that you're a human and start to think that you're like a demigod. And hubris is the Greek word for many things, but it kind of means a crossing of boundaries. It's like you're getting past the reasonable boundary that's set for you. There's a passage in Aristotle's biological works where there's one plant, I forget what kind of plant it is, that Aristotle characterizes it as reaching over into the domain of another plant, and it's hubris. He's like, it happens in the animal world too.
There's a lot of plants that have the word hubris in it, isn't there?
Yeah, well, hybrid is another, that's related to hubris. It's a kind of crossing of boundaries. These things aren't supposed to mix. Yeah.
Go ahead. Let me interrupt you.
Well, when you get to the top, that's the characteristic vice of greatness. That's the failure mode of success is getting too big for your britches. Hubris is forgetting to take the time to reflect, to realize that you're mortal, that your judgment can be mistaken, that you're just a human and your other humans kind of have claims on your time, or have reasonable things to say, and you don't want to listen to them because you think like I'm Julius Caesar. I don't need to listen to you. Julius Caesar himself, that is the kind of tragic case of possibly, I think you could argue it's hubris, but it blinds you. That's the thing also.
Well, let's just keep it even more simple. I know where you're getting, because this is where I was hoping we'd get to anyways. They are out of balance. And that's the key. You're not saying don't have an ego. You need it.
Right.
But it needs balance. And that's where I might differ from what you said earlier. We'll study the brain and maybe some outside source will tell us you don't need it. It's all within you. You just need balance. And that doesn't mean straight up and down balance. Like, look at a pendulum, right? A pendulum swings and it goes to the far end. What's going to happen? You're going to have these forces that are going to push it way back the other way, right? Equal or greater forces. It's not going to go from here to here. It's going to go back, and then it's going to swing. But eventually, you want to stay within a range. That's life. You don't want to be static. And that's where everything in this universe has polarity.
Yeah. I mean, my life has just been kind of obsession after obsession, going in different directions. And, I think that characterizes so much of, it's Gary Keller. I was reading his book a while ago, and he talks about achieving focus sometimes requires having a messy desk. There's times when things get chaotic and you clean it up, and balance is about the kind of the sum of the time, not any particular moment. It's swinging in the direction of just hyper focus, and then maybe swinging in the direction of taking a sabbatical, or having a vacation, or just kind of going easy with your business, reading, studying. There's different kinds of challenges improve you, but there's also ways to improve yourself through reading philosophy or biographies, kind of reflecting, that you need to kind of energize yourself. So I think the happy balance is really, the classical balance is kind of extremes in either direction at different times. And
you're right. You're right. I mean, so going back to the analogy, the ego is needed to be there. It's better if the ego protection goes back to the stance of guarding Buckingham Palace, and let Buckingham Palace do its thing, which is basically let the conscious and subconscious talk, negotiate, figure things out, and then be ready for the next day. So you're right. How do you do that? One, take a break, take a sabbatical, but you can do it every day. It's called introspection, right? I think you and I talked about it when we first had a prep call. I know you talk to yourself a lot. You've never told me this, but I know you do, right? Because I know you can't get to where you are without introspection, because and people do it without even doing it. Go to sleep, have a good sleep, have a deep sleep, right? Or go take a walk, clear your head. But more than anything, have that conversation with your inner voice.
I find that it really helps to do it with pen and paper. You can call it journaling. Sometimes I just do it in my calendar. You got to get it out on paper. Ask yourself some questions, and sometimes you have the answers, but you don't know how to ask them to yourself. And it helps to just write down, what is the thing that's holding me back right now? Why can't I make this decision? Why is it so hard? And once you actually consciously ask the question, suddenly the answer will kind of pop up to you. But it requires some deliberation and some self-control.
Of course. I mean, you got to question yourself, and that's when you have your ego at bay. But if you don't question yourself, you're out of balance, and that's your key, restore balance. And now we all have an amazing tool to help us even introspect even further, faster, better, if you do it right. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't do it right, and that's called AI. But unfortunately, no one is giving you a lesson on how to use AI.
Yeah, it requires a lot of experimentation.
And you got to challenge yourself. I mean, unfortunately, a lot of people go down the wrong path, and it's unfortunately really disturbing their lives and causing even more imbalance. And others are using it as a glorified Google. That's fine. That's great. That works too. But the other ones that are really doing it proper are asking the right questions and getting better answers.
So important to ask the right questions.
So let's talk about it. Let's talk about questions, and let's talk about Socrates, because that's a great thing that can be used all throughout life and business and everything.
I was
I'll
about
let
to
you know.
go there anyway. Yeah.
So you're the expert. I've always been a believer. For many years, I taught a communication workshop, and in that workshop, it was teaching people how to do content for the visual, like in the deck, let's say, the visuals, but then Q&A, and that was always my favorite. And I'll let you go from there because I know you'll say it better with more historical context and weight and make it more interesting.
Well, people came to Socrates, for really training and communication. That was his role in the eyes
So
of
one
the
second.
Athenians.
Why? What
Yeah.
was he a professor? What was he actually? Why did it come to him?
Well, think about how Athens works as a city in Greece. So Greece has got all these independent city-states. They all have their way of running things politically. But Athens
So
is
like
a
states,
democracy.
right? You have
Yeah.
right.
Little tiny states the size of, Malta or the Vatican City, Liechtenstein. And so Athens is a democracy. And one of the features of a democracy is or at least in Athens, you have to, if you get prosecuted in court or if you want to take somebody to court, you have a dispute, you have to speak in your own voice in the courtroom. You can't hire a lawyer. There are no lawyers. So
Well, I'd save a lot of money.
yeah, right. It sounds great to me. Well, and what that means is everybody realizes how important it is to speak. And because how well you speak in front of a jury of your peers, maybe it's 100, maybe it's 500 people, that determines whether, your boundary is the true boundary or what your neighbor proposes is the boundary.
If you don't mind, I'm
so,
going to interrupt you because you said it's to speak, and that's true. But it's really more importantly, and that's why the judicial system, if it's done well, works. At minimum, they want an opportunity to be heard, not just speak.
yeah, it's about getting your case heard and having the right to kind of vent your anger on somebody. That's actually something that the Greeks talk about. Like the courtroom isn't just to apply abstract justice. It isn't just about correcting. They don't call their punishment correctional facilities. It's really about kind of giving anger and frustration
An
of
avenue
a
of
channel,
venting,
like a legitimate
right?
avenue to vent it.
Because that's ultimately what leads to you then buying into the solution, even if you don't agree with it completely. At least you feel part of the solution was because of your venting.
Because even if you lose, there's 500 people in there that heard you lay into your, cheating business partner or whatever it is. And at least you got to drag him through the mud for a couple of hours. Or her. Yeah.
Let's be modern here.
So, yeah, right. So, yeah, I think that there was a lot of, I mean, it had a real logic to it, the Athenian court system. And also, they have the political assembly if you want to, propose a tax cut or a tax hike, you want to go to war or argue for peace. You can stand up and speak in Athens because
And isn't that
that's
the
how they
true
do it.
power of democracy, right? You can say
Mm-hmm.
what you want with freedom and knowing that it will be received with respect. And that doesn't mean agreement. It just means it'll be heard with respect and factored in if proper. If not, it'll be factored out. But at least you'll be told one way or another why it was factored out. And that itself is another other power and beauty of you feeling you were heard.
When it functions well, that's how it's supposed to work for sure.
But hey, humans got to run this thing.
Right. To take it to Socrates, their Athenian democracy is they've recently kind of had a lot of success in war and politics. They've kind of grown wealthy. There's a lot of people coming in, and the stakes are higher. And people start to realize, hey, there's a lot of demand for this skill, and so people, very Greek Mediterranean entrepreneurial spirit comes in and says, well, hey, I'm a pretty good speaker. I can teach you. And that you have this rise of these professional teachers, the first kind of educational entrepreneurs in Athens. They called them rhetoricians, or they more commonly they call them sophists. And So there's all these kind of, professional teachers taking fees. Sometimes they're taking big fees. They're getting rich, teaching the students of the rich young men. They're promising that they're going to train you in leadership and that you're going to be able to command armies, and I can teach you all kinds of.
So
So
now the egos are going
Socrates
up.
is the egos are rising, and Socrates is kind of in that category, but he's also not, because he's got a job. He is a shoemaker. No, he's a statue maker. He's like a carver of, stone. So he has an income, and he doesn't take any money. He refuses money. But he's like the best of all of these sophists. And so much that he's very balanced, and he doesn't, he said, I don't do this because I'm trying to raise my own credibility. I do this because I'm curious and I'm trying to get to the bottom of things, because I realize that a lot of people are confused about what they mean when they talk about justice, moderation, courage. He's a patriot. He loves Athens, and he wants to improve the leaders. He gets some of the most influential young men who go on to these great, sometimes brilliant, sometimes, checkered careers. And that's like who Socrates is.
This brings us back to your academic life, because I've been involved with academia, and I'm sure you felt this. Those who want to be in power and leadership really shouldn't be. But those who don't want it are the ones who should be. And that's what, Socrates is at. He's the guy, he's not looking for the money. He's just genuinely curious. And he loves solving problems.
Yeah. And a lot of his students they saw some of his bad students. One of them, Xenophon, this Greek author, is a student of his, tells a story about these two guys, Alcibiades and Critias, but they were students of Socrates for a while, and he kind of kept them in check. They weren't going to crazy parties. They weren't, trying to aggrandize themselves and start wars and cheat their fellow citizens. But when they left Socrates, they started to kind of revert to their true nature. And he also suggests that they were kind of hanging around to get some moral credibility, because he had all this moral credibility. And so I think that if you become prominent and have a good reputation for being, virtuous and honest, that you will kind of paradoxically attract people who are slimy, who want to be close to somebody to kind of, whitewash themselves.
Cred. Get social cred.
Yeah, to get social cred. So that was Xenophon's take on how this happens. And so many of and Plato was another student famously of Socrates, and he's one of the most famous articulators of this theory that, the best leaders aren't trying to, jockey for position and climb their way to the top. But for that reason, they're really rare.
The social credit reminded me at one time, a friend of mine said, I bought this near Harrods. That means it's not from Harrods, but it's near. It could have been a stall. But the credit is, it came from near Harrods.
That's amazing.
That's it in a nutshell, right?
It?
That's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. His real power is like asking these tough questions about, what do you really mean when you say, I want to lead my city. Okay, what do you mean by lead? Do you mean
so I'm going to argue a little bit with you.
Hold office?
I don't think it's tough questions. They're pertinent and concise questions.
Yeah. Very targeted questions about figuring out where people's assumptions lie, getting them to question their assumptions.
That's what we do in market research, right? We do that in focus groups. Why? Why does he do that? Because that's your avenue to the subconscious. Right? Because we all have it, but when you start getting people to, first of all, when you ask a question, it automatically forces someone to think, not just react. Some might react, then you ask another question, right? And you get them in the mode of actually thinking. And as you can think, you go deeper and deeper. And that's what you do in market research, go deeper and deeper. And at some point, you're going to unravel that aha moment. No pun intended.
By kind of peeling back the layers of the onion, you can, I think Socrates really had this effect on people. He would kind of force them to realize that they might have been chasing something that they didn't really want. Like a lot of young men wanted to get rich in Athens. Athens was a, kind of a capitalist city where you could, rise up quickly in a fortune, unlike places like Sparta that were much more kind of fixed social hierarchies, not a lot of social
Well,
mobility.
actually, the pursuit of being rich is kind of unique and to people, right? Everybody
Yeah,
wants to do that.
everybody wants to do it, but Athens was a great place to do it. And I mean, I love wealth building. I'm in business, but I think he could identify, well, why do you want to make that money? What do you really want to do with it? Do you just want to be rich so you can drink a lot of wine, have the best wine, have strippers at your party?
But the real thing is, he knew if you pursue it for money, you will fail. Why? Why did he know you will fail? Versus if you actually try to solve a problem, you probably will make money. Finding what value are you going to deliver? Because ultimately, people will pay you for value. And what value do most people pay you for? Hey, if you can save them time, they'll pay you money for that. If you can save them money, they'll pay money to save money. If you make it more convenient, they'll pay you for that. If you can do all three and an emotion, wow. Now we're talking not just 3x, let's say, doing those first three, but now we're talking possibility of 6, 10, 12x.
I mean, this is why people give to charity often, it gives them the sense of meaning and this way of looking at themselves that is better than what they might have thought. It helps them to feel like they're a good person, which is incredibly valuable, it turns out. Like it's, hundreds of millions of dollars valuable,
But if you actually think it and feel it and convey it, that's more value.
You might find it's cheaper actually to just realize or to make the choice to be a good person rather than to try to spend your time seeming like a good person.
It's so much easier. But hey, we're humans. We like to make things complex, Why? Because we have time.
Yeah, well, and a lot of people are trying to get us to buy their products or trying to get us to feel the pain so that they can lead us in a certain direction. And we're all influencing each other all the time, and it's really hard not to be influenced. I think it was Socrates that was responsible for, I mean, so much of Western history in the end because of who he inspired, which included some of the famous authors of antiquity. Xenophon is this great warrior soldier. More famously, Plato, who founded a philosophical school and really kind of invented the concept of philosophy. That it's in Plato's conception, in ancient philosophy is really about, it's the ancient art of personal development, as distinct from merely promising you success in life and the ability to kind of speak well and talk your way into political office or in the law courts. Philosophy is the beginning of like systematizing wisdom that will help you flourish in life and actually be happy. This is really what ancient philosophy promised. And if it weren't for Socrates, we wouldn't have Stoicism. We wouldn't have
you wouldn't have the legal
philosophy.
System that is sound. It's the basis of a legal system, especially in court, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's employing a Socratic method.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's so fundamental to the way we teach in law school, the way that medieval universities to modern universities function. I mean, Socrates is just at the heart of like, let's get down to first principles. What do you really think? And kind of drawing people out like that.
And I just made this realization, to be honest with you, talking to you. I didn't have this like pre-planned. If you really think about it, this is tied into what we talked about earlier. Questioning, again, we talk about goes to the subconscious and unravels it. But this is the active introspection machine. I mean, you and I just had an aha moment.
Yeah, well, questioning, I think this is true. Questioning is the thing that allows you to change directions if you're not going the right direction.
Because now you're aligning your conscious and subconscious on a real-time level. I mean, isn't that ultimately how you get buy-in? From others, for yourself, everything. The concept of buy-in, right? You can tell people, do this or do that. That's authoritarian. But if you want true buy-in, it requires dialogue. It requires a conversation. And everyone feels that they've heard. And that is a true democracy, right? And that feeds what humans want, which is freedom, which is what we talked about. But if you get into an autocratic method, which ends up happening in many, many civilizations. And that, you know more than I do, is the beginning of the end of that version.
Yeah, you can't rule without the consent of the governed, and no matter who you are, the most kind of despotic tyrant police state needs mass, consent. Actually, they need cred. Yeah, I mean, there's a classic story of Dionysius, the tyrant of Syracuse, who, he's like the most despotic tyrant in all of antiquity, and he would not let anybody, even in his family, into his presence without having them strip down naked in front of his guards and put their clothes back on because he's so paranoid. And he had his daughters, he wouldn't allow a barber to shave him, with like a straight razor. So he had his daughters, so the story goes, come in with hot coals and singe his bristly beard as an old man.
I'm sure the great things for his complexion.
Yeah, right. Imagine that. So nobody's more lonely than the tyrants,
But this is a universal law, I think, and that is the more control you try to exert, the less control you'll have in the end, if any control.
I think so many of the great leaders from antiquity, and you can say this about Napoleon even. I mean, he's a control freak, but he also, and Julius Caesar also very much a control freak, but they also have this sense of like, there's a greater power at play, there's fortune, and there's some limit to what you can control. And whether you call it destiny, whether you call it fortune, you're destined to win or to lose, and you don't actually have control over the outcome. And paradoxically, if you realize that you don't have control, ultimately, it allows you to do your job better. It allows you to focus on what you do have control of, and that's fighting like hell, or giving it a real go in the court, whatever the case may be.
Let's apply it to business in simple form. What is control? Well, in business, you're always looking at what's the competition doing? What are they doing? What can we do better, right? That's okay. You got to keep a pulse on it. But guess what? You control nothing about the competitor. You control everything about you. So I have a philosophy. I am my biggest competitor. Because I can control. I'll give you an example. Kodak, great company for many, many years. I don't know if most people know. Kodak actually invented the digital camera. An engineer told them about this, where the future's going. And guess what Kodak management said? That doesn't work for us because we're making a lot of money with film, chemicals, rolls. That's where our bread and butter is. But I would argue, is that their core business, Alex? I would say no. Their core business was memories, not film and stuff. And look where Kodak is now, and look where digital cameras are now. None of your phones say the brand Kodak on it, but it's all about memories still.
And you could have gotten that with a real kind of hard look at first principles, like asking the right questions. What is the real value here?
What do you mean by first principles? Go explain that in a nutshell to us sixth grader.
I think to me, first principles is about finding the most fundamental building blocks of value and
that would help you say the core truth. You want to get to a core truth.
You want to get to the core truth. That's a simpler way to put it, really. First principles is kind of jargon these days.
We've all been told that. The truth is powerful. You have no idea how powerful it is. It's incredibly powerful. So yeah, you're right. Get to the core truth.
Well, just to take a personal example, when I was leaving academia, I kept asking myself, what is the core truth of, what people get out of the ancient world? And I just thought back to the early days of, these sophists kind of, maybe they want to learn how to speak well. But I think ultimately it's you go back even further and you look at the first poets of the Western tradition, Homer and his Iliad. It's about telling stories of great people and entertaining people, getting them to laugh and to cry and to kind of get outside their daily experience and listen to stories of people daring greatly, suffering greatly, bragging, getting shamed, but learning lessons from their mistakes, often getting inspired by their successes. And fundamentally, good storytelling is the essence of what we do as, scholars of the ancient world. If we don't do that, we've completely, done whatever to the bed. We've failed. We've fumbled the ball. And that's why I turned to podcasting, to the Cost of Glory, and telling these stories at great length. And the response has been very good, because it took me years to really figure out, what exactly are we doing? Are we teaching critical thinking? Okay, that's important, but that's not the fundamental thing. Are we teaching writing skills? It's important. It's not the fundamental thing. What is the fundamental thing? And I think for any industry that you're in, identifying what that is and where you fit in the value chain. Maybe we're selling pickaxes to the people doing the fundamental thing, but hey, that's still a business. But
yeah,
know
the
what you're
fundamental
doing,
thing
right?
is you want insights from either the past, present, and obviously again from the future. And it's interesting if you think about it. In finance, right, in stocks, people look at historical data and try to study insights, but they tell you, prior history is not an indicator of what could happen in the future. Of course, that's legalese saying to cover themselves, but it's true. But then why even look at the past? Because you're trying to glean insights. And financial, that's about money, right? People do that for money. But why can't people do that for human civilization, right? It's the same thing. Learn from it. But and I know, human civilization repeats history every 80 years. And I'm going to let you tell why.
That's about as long as it takes us to realize that we're smarter, to believe that we're smarter than our parents and our grandparents, and to forget all the lessons that that went before.
Well, the reality is, it takes that amount of time that there's no one around that remembers the earlier experience. And if you think about everything we know now in this modern world, came from what you said earlier. Storytelling. We didn't have Google back then. We didn't have hard drive, terabytes of stuff to save all our data. It was here, and it was what we told others. It got passed down.
And stories, they are an amazing. They're like one of our first human technologies. We like, long before we were making wheels or even planting crops, we were telling stories to each other. We had language, and what that allows you to do is to distill experience across generations.
That's right.
And that is an incredible advantage.
It encapsulates emotion, all kinds of things that it's like, that was the modern day version of full on video on Instagram, right? You can do an Instagram picture, but a video does a lot more, right? It has picture, it has video, it has sound, it has all kinds of imagery. That's where you use your hands, whatever. That's storytelling in a different medium.
And it's just, storytelling is like how we learn from others' experience. That's the basic way that we can learn. If we weren't there, this allows us to know that the red mushrooms with the spots are bad because we heard about, so-and-so who ate one and died.
And that's where we go for movies that have meaning and purpose. They're more interesting and fun,
Yeah.
That's an escape, but you learn from that.
There's this other aspect that I'm really into about history, is that when you hear about something that somebody does that's very impressive, often, maybe they're a contemporary, maybe it's somebody from history, you feel this kind of like pang of, especially if they're kind of, you can see yourself in them. There's this specific pain that Aristotle talks about, that he called it Zealous. We might call it emulation today.
Is that the current version of being jealous or zealot? I don't know.
Yeah, this is where the word zealot and jealous both come from. He says it's the pain felt when a man sees present, or a person sees present among others who are like them, things good and honorable, which they themselves are capable of attaining. So it's different from envy, because for Aristotle, envy is the thing that makes you want to, prevent somebody from having something good, or makes you want to deprive somebody. Somebody has a nice car, you just want to smash it because they're probably an ass. But zeal is that motivation that you need, is that kind of pain that spurs you on to try to bring out the best in yourself.
Yeah, that's like, Alex has this, that's great, I'm happy for him, but what can I do to help myself to be that or better? That's
exactly.
Zeal, right?
It's about, how can I get that?
It's not about competing
what
with
is it
you.
Gonna take?
It's taking lessons from you, and how can I build from that?
And this is the fundamental emotion of history, I think, for some of the great Greek philosophers. This is why we do it. This is why we tell these stories. This is like is why history should, if it's done right, if you read the right books, it gives you energy and it gives you that drive
I'd
to
say it's even
imagine
more
something
simple than
bigger.
that, because that's the way we can live our legacy.
Yeah, it's
Because if you
becoming
think about it,
an
for
object of
many
zeal
people,
yourself.
their life, their true life begins when they pass away because of the legacy they've left. And that's how people and man can come close to being immortal.
Well, what the Romans would do is they had these wax masks, these like plaster kind of masks that they took from their ancestors. And I think they probably had the molds, and if the wax gets gross, you can make another one. But essentially, you have like in your house, there's a special kind of alcove where they keep all the masks from your grandfather, your great grandfather, your great 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 grandfather, and they bring you in front of it periodically as a boy. You light some incense, and you kind of honor the dead, and you are, you know, this is part of your education. They make you learn and recount all the deeds of those men that went before you, who led armies for the Republic, who made laws, who did this and that brave thing. And it's this constant reminder that you need to live up to their example, because someday that's going to be you. You're a piece of a long thread, and the thread's going to continue after you, and you have to leave something for the next generation to kind of aspire to.
And that thread doesn't necessarily mean bloodline, even though it does. It can mean other things, right? Like right? I mean, you're a professor, right? I mean, you've trained and professors, and I'm saying in some cases, not all, you've changed their life, the way they think, the way they do it. That is a thread that's not tied to your bloodline.
It's I mean, I think that's maybe more powerful. You can have kids.
Actually, the
But
hardest
I
thing
mean,
to do
Plato talks
is
about this.
hardest thing to do is pass your thread to the bloodline.
Yeah, right.
That's the hardest.
It's a lot easier sometimes. You find people that kind of think like you outside your family as often as not, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but Plato talks about some of the great lawgivers of the past, like Lycurgus of Sparta, who's this famous. He set out the Spartan constitution, which was widely regarded as very just and powerful. And Plato said, well, Lycurgus might have had kids, but his real children that really outlived him, that were immortal, were the laws that he gave the Spartans. That it's like there's something more valuable about potentially about the legacy that you can give to the next generations, that is actually longer lasting than a bloodline, more eternal, shaping the character of a nation. This is like the highest honor for the Greeks, is, being a lawgiver, being a founder of a city, being an institutor of like a discovery, things like that.
And that is real power and influence for good. And that addresses what I think most people have in them is, I would say most people want to leave the world a little bit better than when they came in. But lots of noise, lots of distractions. We lose sight of that. But I think with the chaos that's happening in the world, it is meant to be. These are stages, right? These are cycles. It's going to happen. But what's going to come out of this? If clarity comes out of this, it was well worth maybe the lesson. There's going to be suffering for sure. But at the end of the day, if there's clarity, it's like what truly is a mistake? You make a wrong decision, you made a mistake, fine. If you don't learn from it, it is now, you've encapsulated it as a true mistake. But if you learn from it, you've now taken away the fact it's a mistake, and you turn it into a learning event. But honestly, a lot of times you don't even recognize it. You're told it by others. Like, you jerk, you made a mistake, man. You might start losing social credit. Now you know you made a mistake.
Well, if you're in business, somebody's going to tell you. They're either going to tell you,
Yeah,
or
it's called a
they're going to
review.
beat you. Yeah.
You got a 1-star or a 5-star.
Gotta listen to that feedback. Yeah.
Alex, we can go for a couple hours, and we will. We'll do another episode. But in this episode, I would like to ask you, where do you see yourself spending more time in the future to get a deeper understanding of history, man, life, human nature, the whole works, man?
Well, I've read a lot of history from books, and I've met a lot of the great figures that have been dead for thousands of years. And so now I think the thing that excites me the most is, you know, developing relationships with people who are out there crushing it in the world or facing incredible challenges, and learning from their wisdom and being able to kind of triangulate what I see in great leaders now that I also see in great figures from the past. And, you know, maybe what are the differences? Maybe, you know, greatness isn't made in one way, but I think to me, I've learned, you know, I like having enough resources, wealth to like live a decent life and to do what I want, but I run out of things to spend money on quickly enough. And the things that I get the most fulfillment and joy out of are relationships and seeing people that I've known for a long time grow. You know, there's just nothing more satisfying than like seeing your friends succeed if you can get into that mindset. And so helping them out
Because now
is,
you know you've made a positive impact to the greater goal, which is leave, whether it's a person, people, or whatever, something a little bit better than when you found it.
yeah. But I'll keep podcasting probably until I die. I mean, it's been
All right,
a good run so far.
You got it. You got tenure in your podcast. You did it yourself. I'll do that myself. You got the power to do that. That's great.
Stick with it.
If you could have a meal or drinks with anyone in the world, present or past, who would it be, and what would you want to find out?
Well, this is kind of a stupid, obvious answer, perhaps, but for me, it's Plato. You know, because Plato was like we talked about. He's a student of Socrates. He knew the man. He's from a great family, and he wrote all of these dialogues, never in his own voice. You know, all of the dialogues of Plato, all of his philosophical treatises, he's got two characters speaking. Usually one is Socrates, maybe there's several characters, but Plato never really speaks in his own voice, with one exception, is this letter he wrote. And I'd like to know kind of why he did it all, you know? What was your real motivation? Did you, because Plato's school lasted longer than any of the philosophical schools. It lasted 1,000 years. It was still running in Athens by the reign of Justinian in the 6th century AD. It's still there, basically studying Plato, doing the thing.
So what did he do different than the others? I mean, obviously a different voice, but that's got to be more than that.
Yeah, I think that he made a philosophy that explained to people, not just on an intellectual level, but on an emotional level, why relationships are the key, why you need to have a community to really do philosophy. I think that's what it was about for Plato. It's not just about the advice for life, but it's about finding people that are like-minded and getting together with them and spending time. And it kind of has this this social element to Platonism that I think is just more pronounced there than in any of the other philosophies.
I think you're absolutely correct. No, you're absolutely correct. I'll tell you why. When I hire people now, I look for 3+1. Why do I do 3? I like the power of 3 in the universe. As you know, there's a power of 3 in the universe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
the triangle.
Yeah. That's right. And it's all around everywhere. But what's the +1? And I need to ask you, first of all, please define philosophy. Because people use it, but I don't think they know the true meaning of philosophy. I had to look it up not that long ago to learn the true meaning. So please, you're my guru of philosophy here for now.
Oh, man.
Right, let me give it to you my way. Let me give it to you my way, and you tell me if I'm wrong. Basically, philosophy is knowing that there's more than one way to solve a problem. It's critical thinking. And knowing that if the mind says, say, I don't mind the problem, I just love the solution.
That's pretty close to what it means in Greek. It's the love of wisdom. And you can't love wisdom if you don't like struggling with problems, you know? Like that is where it's forged. It's whether it's questioning things intellectually, being willing to question your presuppositions, or trying things out in business and relationships and failing and asking yourself, why did that go well, or why did that blow up in my face?
My father actually says the solution is born before the problem.
I don't know how to get my mind around that. What do you mean by that?
It's already out there. You just got to tap into it. And the reason you're going to tap into it is that the problem made you realize this problem, but then you realize, hey, there's a solution already.
Yeah, I love it. Well, you gotta kind of move with faith. There is an answer. Maybe you'll die trying to find it, but it's out there.
At least you leave the groundwork for somebody else. Going back to it, when I look for someone to work with or hire or whatever, I look for three things that I can't teach. Are they hungry? Are they doers? And are they thinkers? Because with those three skill sets, we're pretty good. But if you add on the fourth element, the philosophical, we're solid. That's all you need to solve problems. But you do need that fourth element to really be a power solver.
I think that's a good philosophy ought to train you in that. Yeah.
Alex, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate your wisdom, knowledge, and I appreciate the fact you're a rebel, man.
Try not to get ahead of myself. Thank you. Yeah, it's been great, Darshan. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks a lot.
Getting to AHA was brought to you by iResearch. To find out more about us, head to iResearch.com and make sure to search for Getting to AHA in Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and anywhere else podcasts are found. And don't forget to click follow to ensure you don't miss any future episodes. Thank you for listening.